voting for Secretary of Defense is one of the most important votes we're going to take all year. It mystifies me that of all the people President Trump could have nominated as Secretary of Defense, he picked someone as flawed, as deeply flawed, as Mr. Hegseth. Is Pete Hegseth really the best we have to lead the greatest military in the world? Is this man, with a history of excessive drinking, really the guy you want on the other end of the phone at 2 a.m. in a crisis, in control of the nuclear codes? Is this man, with a mile-long list of allegations of abusing, degrading, and harassing women, the one we want, leading our men and women into battle? Is this man, who failed to manage the finances of veterans nonprofit groups, who drove his organizations into debt, to the point where he could not even pay creditors, the person we want in charge of the Pentagon's budget? I want this last point to sink in. DoD is a colossal organization. It has a workforce of 3 million people, an annual budget of over $850 billion. Is Pete Hegseth really the person we want overseeing an organization as complex as DoD? A man who couldn't even manage the finances of a small nonprofit, and yet they pick him. It's unbelievable. And he was pressured to resign of these small nonprofits. And now he's supposed to run the Department of Defense with its millions of people under his jurisdiction and billions of dollars. The odds are not low that he'd mismanage the Pentagon's budget if he mismanaged small organizations. Worst of all, his erratic behavior could rear its ugly head. Because we know when people who have a history of erratic behavior go into high-pressure situations, it often makes them more, not less erratic. I refuse to believe that Pete Hegseth is the best the Republicans came up with for Secretary of Defense. There are surely other individuals, plenty of others, the president could nominate. There would be conservative voices. We would disagree with their views, but at least we'd have to admit they're qualified. I can think of some Republican senators who would certainly make a much stronger candidate than Mr. Hegseth. I hope my Republican colleagues think carefully today about the consequences of this vote. I hope they do the right thing and recognize there are much better choices than Secretary of Defense, than Hegseth. The credibility of the Senate, I think the credibility of the Republican majority is on the line with today's vote. The well-being of our troops stationed around the world is on the line with today's vote. The very security of the American people, of our kids and families and neighbors and friends, is on the line with today's vote. In short, we should not, cannot, must not elevate someone as erratic as Pete Hegseth to Secretary of Defense. We can and must do better. I urge my colleagues to vote no. Finally, I want to turn briefly to the subject of Mr. Vote. No nominee is more threatening or antithetical to the needs of working people than this godfather of the ultra-right. Russell Vote is the godfather of the ultra-right, chief cook and bottle washer of Project 2025. When Americans voted for Donald Trump, they were very clear they wanted inflation to go down. They want more affordable prescription drugs. They do not want Project 2025 running the show. But that's precisely what will happen if Vogt becomes director of OMB. If you're one of the tens of millions who benefits from Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, Russell Vogt is a nightmare scenario. If you want lower drug prices, you can forget about it if Russell Vogt is running the show at OMB. If you want lower energy costs, if you want the U.S. to stand up to China, if you want America to create better, clean jobs, Russell Vogt is very bad news. But if you're part of the ultra-rich in this country, if you're an oil executive or own a drug company, Russell Vogt is your golden ticket. If there's any golden age coming under Donald Trump, Russell Vogt proves it's only a golden age for those at the very top. As for everyone else, Donald Trump and Russell Vogt say you're on your own. Yield the floor. Note the absence of a quorum.
Ms. Alston-Brooks.
Senator from Hawaii is recognized.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to officiate the quorum call.
Without objection.
Mr. President, Pete Hegseth is just not qualified to be in charge of the Department of Defense. He would oversee almost 3 million employees around the world in an annual budget of over $800 billion. But his only management experience to date is running 2 very small veterans organizations with, let's just say, mixed results. Even if he had done extraordinarily well in that job, you do not put a person in charge of a small shop suddenly in charge of 3 million employees. He ran organizations with just a few dozen employees and tiny little budgets, and neither of them were anything like the Defense Department in size and scale. And so, on what basis are we supposed to trust that Pete Hegseth can manage not just the largest employer in the country, but one of the largest employers on the planet? Much like the rest of Donald Trump's cabinet, the main criteria for Hegseth's nomination was his loyalty to Donald Trump. And I'm not saying loyalty to the president is some sort of disqualifier. You want your cabinet to be loyal, but it can't be the only thing. You also have to be good at this. And it's not like you couldn't have found a MAGA world person that was a 3-star or a 4-star, or someone who had run a big enterprise, or someone who had been a governor, or someone who had done big things and demonstrated that they can run big complex organizations. That's what this is. This isn't about woke or not woke or foreign policy. This is about, gosh, this is a big job. And to the extent that the United States Senate is in the personnel business, right, to provide our advice and then our consent to a president providing us with a nominee, it's very hard to get to yes on someone who's just never run anything particularly large or complicated. In 2017, and this is his main qualification, he says, I think Donald Trump is the final defensive line for America. And as Trump ran for re-election, he said that there would be a national divorce if Democrats won, and that the military and the police will be forced. The military and the police will be forced to make a choice, and yes, there will be some form of civil war. This is the guy we want to run the Defense Department, who a couple of years ago suggested that if Democrats win, there might be a civil war. It's not just that Hegseth is a Trump acolyte getting a plum job in the administration. There's plenty of that happening. It's also that he has no real understanding substantively of the job that he would be doing. Leading the Department of the Defense is not just a bureaucratic exercise. Day in and day out, month after month, you are issuing billions of dollars in contracts and making decisions that are not at all obvious and super complex and sensitive. There are trade-offs and compromises, and you got to know how, as they say, the building works. And so your knowledge and your experience really matter here, which is why it was so alarming that he wasn't able to name a single member of ASEAN when asked by my colleague Senator Tammy Duckworth at his confirmation hearing. It wasn't a gotcha question. That is pretty basic stuff. ASEAN, which stands for the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, is an essential part of the United States strategy in the Indo-Pacific. These are key partners the Defense Secretary directly engages with. But Hegseth didn't even know the first thing about them and named a bunch of countries that don't even belong to the organization. Later, when he was asked by Senator Slotkin whether he would carry out an illegal order from Donald Trump, like using the military against civilians, he refused to give a straight answer. There are a lot of close calls when you're defense secretary, but whether or not to turn the military on the public, even if they are Democrats, is not a close call. That's a simple no, I wouldn't do that. I will not carry out an illegal order. No, the United States military is not in existence for the purpose of carrying out orders against United States citizens exercising their constitutional rights. Leading our armed forces is not a part-time gig. The Pentagon is not a cable news set where you can roll up on a Saturday and say clever things. You can't improv your way out of global conflicts. The people who lace up and go into battle deserve better than that. They deserve someone who understands the world in all of its complexities and recognizes the weight of their decisions, especially when the chips are down. And Pete Hegseth is not that person. I urge